This is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. So my social media links will be provided for you, along with my email, my Substack, buy me a coffee, and also feedback is greatly important. So on all the platforms that I'm on, it would be appreciated you give me a rating. And also questions, comments, concerns, feel free to email me. Okay, so on 2 audio platforms. I'm on Audible, Amazon Music, Spotify for podcasters, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Overcast, Pocket Cast, and I'm definitely looking to grow to where you enjoy your podcast. I'm on that. So this episode is about the artists that I think relate to Pete Seeger, and my apologies for saying Peter Seeger in the Monday episode. It's Pete Seeger. So I'm going to talk about Joni Mitchell. I'm going to talk about Cat Stevens. And then I'm going to end on the Counting Crows. Now, and I'm going to put some more extra thoughts and emphasis and all of that into it. And I'm going to, particularly in this episode, I'm going to talk about their songs. And so let me go back to Cat Stevens and Joni Mitchell. Now, Cat Stevens and Joni Mitchell are American folk artists, and I decided they were on my list to talk about, but I decided that they fit more in tune to Pete Seeger, and it's a good way to go on and mention with the the later artists of folk music in later years, as far as in the 60s, and then segue to the 90s as a stepping stone to set all that up. And what I'm addressing is talking about the Mamas and the Papas, for example, and then ending on talking about Tracy Chapman and Susan Vega. All right, here we go. Let's jump into this. All right. Before I get into everything about Cat Stevens, Joni Mitchell, and Counting Crows, I want to give a bit of my perspective about them. Growing up, I was very interested in listening to different kinds of music and having the opportunity to do so. And with Cat Stevens and Joni Mitchell, and then, Counting Crows from my generation, I think these three artists are very unique, but they unify in the ideas of talking about the things that they notice within the reality of life in general. Not in general, but from life in general, and then expanding onto this from their different ideas and understanding about relationships and what people go through. So, for instance, Joni Mitchell talking about, about the ups and downs and the trials and tribulations of going through everyday life in the city and so forth. And then moving on to Cat Stevens giving his particular ideas about his stance on what it's like to be in a relationship where they hear you, but they don't want to really hear you, and without driving yourself and to the midst of your abyss, you just wish them well and let them go. And then also addressing the issue between father and son and wishing them well. And tapping in on these different things. And then I'm moving on to talking about Counting Crows, how they address different issues about insecurity within yourself and seeing yourself with the opposite sex and finding your way in relationships, and then also talking about the ins and outs of being and growing up in, well, more along the lines of how I interpreted that, this particular song. Being in a town where sort of like everyone knows the ins and outs about you and moving your way within that. And then the whole aspect of the human condition of tapping on issues about drug addiction and the pain that causes and the drift that causes and how that splits everything up and splits people up and tears everybody apart. It's very interesting, the impacts and how that unites back to the unique, as I mentioned time and again, and particularly with Pete Seeger. Talking about and shedding light on the realities of the human condition that are uniteful and are inspiring and heartfelt, but also talking about things that aren't so pretty, aren't so nice. All right, so let's get into this. Before I get into talking about Cat Stevens' It's a Wild World, you learn something new every day if you want to. So this song is actually not about a relationship. It's about Cat Stevens' own discovery within moving himself in the world and everything else with that. It's quite interesting. And in the facts that I'm going to lay out and address, it talks about and covers that, and it covers about the actress that it was alleged that this song was about, but it's actually not. All right, so let's get into it. All right, so Wild World by Cat Stevens. This is part of the album T for Tillerman, and it was released in 1970. It charted 11 in the U.S. Stevens wrote this song about searching for peace and happiness in a crazy world. There was some speculation that much of the song was a message to Patty D. Arbenville, an actress he had been dating who inspired this song, Lady D. Arbenville. Stevens cleared up this when he spoke about the song on the Chris Isaak Hour in 2009, explaining that it was about his own journey into the wild world. Stevens said, I was trying to relate to my life. I was at the point where it was beginning to happen, and I was myself going into the wild world. I've done my career before, and I was sort of warning myself to be careful this time around because it was happening. It was not me writing about somebody specifically, although other people may have informed the song, but it was more about me. It's talking about losing touch with home and reality. Home especially. And I'm recording outside, so you hear the wind blowing. It's kind of a really windy day. So keep in mind of that. That's what you hear in the background. So Jimmy Cliff was the first to record Wild World, taking it to number 8 in the UK 3 months before Stevens released his version. Cliff explained to Mojo Magazine July 2012 how Steven not only gave him the song, but produced his cover. I felt in connection with Cat Stevens, he said. They tried to market him as a rock act, and like me, he was more than that. And one day I went to the publisher and he played me this demo of Wild World, and he told me that Steve, Cat's real name, had written it, but he didn't like it. I loved it right away, so he called up Steve and put me on the phone. Steve asked him my key was, I said, and he started playing guitar down the phone. He said we have to record it together, so he went in and did the track, and I went in the following day. Helped put on the backing voice with Doris Troy, and then it was time to put my voice on, and Steve directed me to sing the high notes. He was a really good producer, and it was a big hit. Cliff's version wasn't released in America, so it wouldn't compete with Stevens' release. Stevens wrote this during a very productive time after recovering from tuberculosis, a disease attributed by his smoking and fast living following a string of UK hits in 1967 when he was just 18. The near-death experience pushed him to examine his life and think hard about how to spend his days and how to prepare for the afterlife. Like George Harrison, he turned away from his Christian upbringing and looked into Eastern religion, which reflected in his song around this time. Stevens eventually found his calling in Islam, and after his brother gave him a copy of the Quran, he embraced the faith in 1977, changing his name to Yusuf Islam. Wild World was Stevens' first hit in America, where he quickly fell into with the singer-songwriter movement. By this time, he was already very popular in his native UK. He was born and raised in London. And the 3 albums in his back catalog was as follows: T for the Tillerman, which contains Wild World, which ended up selling 3 million copies in the US, as many fans sought out his earlier work. And in 1971, his previous album, Mona Bone Jacob, I believe the pronunciation for that, charted in America, as did a compilation release of his first albums, Matthew and Son, New Masters. He kept the momentum going with Teaser and the Firecat, released later in that year with Moonshadow and Peace Train. Now I'm playing around with having natural sound in the background. So all of you, it would be greatly appreciated. Give me comments about if you like it or not, to give the beach feel. Again, going with the theme of the Harboring Light, with the theme of as it was shown in the previous for my graphic for my show, to have a lighthouse, and I'm playing around with that and seeing what you all think. All right, so here we go. So in an interview with Mojo Magazine, June of 2009, he commented, the comment it was made that lyrically the song has an uninhibited simplicity. Steven responded as this. It was one of those chord sequences that's very common in Spanish music. I turned it around and came up with that theme. which is a reoccurring theme in my work, which is to do with leaving the sadness of leaving and the anticipation of what lies beyond. There is criticism sometimes of my music that is kind of naive, but then again, that's exactly why people like it. It goes back to the pure childish approach of seeing things almost for the first time. A kid can say things like, why is a cow? You should put those words together. But if you do, then it makes you stop and think. Former Yardbird Peter Samuel Smith, who came on board from Mona Bone Jackin album, was Stevens' producer when Tea for the Tilderman was re-released in 2008. He wrote in the liner notes, Stevens' guitar was an octavation, and I used the electric pick signal an octave, that is. I used the electric pick signal on the left of the stereo and the acoustic microphone signal on the right, which gave it a very present and immediate sound. Samuel Smith also noted that you can hear some rattling on the track that was caused by John Ryan's double bass, which was held together with band-aids and duct tape. This was released as a single only in the U.S. Stevens' European label, Island Records, wanted to encourage fans to buy the album rather than the 45s. Maxi Priest recorded this in 1988, taking it to number 5 in the UK. This meant the song was a top 10 hit in Stevens' native land for 2 different artists, Priest and Jimmy Cliff, but not for him. In America, 4 different versions hit the chart. 1979, Cat Stevens' original was number 11 and 71, and 71 again. The Gentry's was number 97. Maxi Priest of 89 was 25. And 1993, Mr. Big, it was charted as number 27. Maxi Priest was well known in his native UK, but hadn't released any songs in America when this label, Virgin Records, had him cover Wild World with the producers Sly and Robbie to break into the market. Maxi didn't like it, but went along with the plan. All the way from England on the plane to Jamaica to record with Sly and Robbie, I didn't want to do it, he told Songfacts. And this is the source that I'm reading from. It wasn't until Sly and Robbie started to play the track that I could see a vision, and with their motivation, the rest is history. You have to have an open mind to learn from other people, he added. You have to allow others to bring their experience and wisdom to at least be heard. Take time to listen, look for the positive, and put aside the negatives. So this experience with Wild World has taught me to keep an open mind. Maybe I should just go around hating all the songs and they will become hits. Who knows? And I'm going to close out by saying this. This rounds down and brings to the authenticity of folk music and to people who embrace folk music and adapt them into their repertoire for music, that Maxi Priest said it best. It was very eloquent how he said it. When you put aside your own differences, you dig deep and you start to understand things with a better meaning, and you start to have more evolved ideas about things, and it helps you stay grounded as a person, I believe. And I think, of course, I mean, it's only music, but I think that it says a lot about humanity in itself when, particularly with folk music, the folk artists take a stand in these sort of things, and they see things in this way. They embrace things that are different. They talk about things that are uncomfortable. They talk about the ups and downs of life, and they just meld those things in to a way to get people to understand and to hear and to listen and to be a part of the message in their movement, particularly if the folk artists, commonly what they do, they use their music as an outlet to address real issues and to help solve those real issues. All right, so here we go. I'm going to get into talking about Joni Mitchell. Okay. Big Yellow Taxi by Joni Mitchell is part of the album Ladies of the Canyon, which was released in 1970. It charted 11 in the UK and 24 in the US. Mitchell, from a 1996 interview with the Los Angeles Times, said this: "I rode Big Yellow Taxi on my first trip to Hawaii. I took a taxi to the hotel, and when I woke up the next morning, I threw back the curtains and saw these beautiful green mountains in the distance. Then I looked down, and there was a parking lot as far as the eye could see, and it broke my heart. This paradise, that was what this was. I sat down, and that's what I started to write based on these plaques." And I'm adding this in as ad-lib. The song was about taking things for granted and then missing them when they were gone. In the first verse, she uses Waikiki, Hawaii, as an example. This used to be paradise, but now it's a fakey tourist destination. When you fly over the islands, all of the other islands are nice and green, but when you go over Oahu, you see Waikiki and Honolulu buildings. The line, "Took all the trees, put them in a tree museum, charged the people $1.50 just to see them," refers to Foster Gardens, a place in Waikiki which is basically a tree museum. It's a huge garden full of trees, so tall you feel like you're in Alice in Wonderland. The line, "Put away that DDT now, gives me spots on my apples, but leaves me the birds and the bees," refers to the insecticide DDT, which was used on crops. And also, which is what I'm going to read further about the problems with that, as far as the insecticide and the health issues that it caused for people who inhaled this particular insecticide. The effects of the chemical were in the news as Americans learned that their food was being contaminated by its use. Those spotless apples looked great, but hidden in dangers. Also, birds were eating the insects and fish poisoned by DDT, which caused them to lay brittle eggs and put many species in danger, including the bald eagle. In 1972, DDT was banned for most uses. Most of the song deals with environmental concerns, but in the last verse, the singer's boyfriend leaves her old man. This is where we hear the song's title for the first time, as Big Yellow Taxi comes to take him away. The line, "They paved paradise and put up the parking lot," refers to the destruction of the Garden of Allah, a Hollywood hotel renowned for its rowdy celebration parties. And I'm going to add some tidbits about this. This is the song, "Put Up a Parking Lot." This particular phrase is what first introduced me to Joni Mitchell, and just her songwriting just really, to me personally, it takes you on a journey into as almost theatrical in the aspects of how she's explaining things and talking about things. She taps on the importance of going in depth and going beyond looking at the world around you, actually digging into the environmental aspects of looking into the world around you, and really, really, really paying attention to how to protect it and take care of it. But also superseding this, as superseding, I mean more along the lines as the meta aspect, which the Shakespearean aspect of telling a story within a story of going on, and then talking about things as far as personal relationships. Quite interesting. Mitchell lived in Laurel Canyon, which is a section of Los Angeles, when she wrote this song. That's the reference in the album title. At the time, big news in California was the battle to save the redwood forest, which were threatened by developers eager to cut down the trees to build shopping centers and other amenities. As Mitchell implies in this song could lend to trees someday becoming something you could only see in a museum. As a group called the Neighborhood hit in 29, which hit 29 in the U.S. in their version, and this in 1970. Others to cover this included Percy Faith, Bob Dylan, Amy Grant, and Counting Crows, with Vanessa Carlton singing backup. Janet Jackson also sampled it in 1997 for her hit Got Till It's Gone. Yes, baby, thanks to her producer Jimmy Jam, who is a big Joni Mitchell fan. Okay, sweetie. Okay. In 1975, Mitchell released a live version hit that reached number 24 in the U.S. Mitchell included a slightly revised version of the song on her 2007 album Shine. She explains why to Mojo magazine February end of the year 2008. It fits the records. I didn't have to change anything except the price, which went from $1.50 to an arm and a leg. At the suggestion of Joni Mitchell, Amy Grant updated some of the words in her version. For instance, changing the price of the museum from $1.50 to 25 cents. Her cover was released as a single in 1995, peaking at 20 in the UK and 67 in the US. The Counting Crows covered the song as an afterthought and originally for a hidden track on their 2002 album Hard Candy. It was only released as a single version after Vanessa Carlton's backup vocals were added for a new version of that. It featured on the soundtrack of the 2003 movie 2 Weeks Notice. Their version became the band's only top 20 single in the UK, peaking at 13 in the US, and it reached number 42. Reflecting on the song in a 1994 interview with Mojo, Mitchell said, "What I realize now is that songs like Circle Game and Big Yellow Taxi have almost become nursery rhymes. They've become part of the culture." So, not only was the song involved in the movie 2 Weeks Notice. Yes, sweetie, hold on. It was also involved in Californication, Everybody's an Effing Critic in 2013, and My Name is Earl of 2006 in the episode Robbed a Stoner Blind, and in France of 1996 in the episode The One with the Two Parties. Alright, so here we go. Let's go on and wrap up with Counting Crows. But let me mention with this, I'm also going to ask more feedback of how y'all like me using natural sounds and nature, particularly wind, as a part of a background in my episodes. Again, as referring to the theme of the lighthouse and the hovering light, and you get that beachy feel, and also with light that I'm using the harboring light as a metaphor that throughout the storms in our life or in society, there's always hope. All right, so here we go. We're reaching the end, and I'm going to talk about the Counting Crows. All right, Hanging Around by Counting Crows. It was part of the album The Desert Life, which was released in 1999 and charted 46 in the UK and 28 in the US. Counting Crows rose to fame quickly with their 1993 album, selling over 10 million copies worldwide. For the founders, Adam Duritz and David Bryan, however, it was a longer road, as each of them spent a lot of time in Northern California kicking around with different bands before Counting Crows. In an interview with Song Facts with Adam Duritz, he says that it was inspired. Twist that up there. Okay, let's start over. He says that it is what inspired the song. We spent 10 years in clubs, so I spent a lot of years hanging around Berkeley. Not necessarily sure whether I was going anywhere, but having a lot of fun. Being up late, drinking, and playing music. I spent a lot of years not really knowing where that was going. This Desert Life was the group's third album, and it found them in an experimental mood. We were trying to be creative with how things sound, and Hanging Around was just the first one we worked on, Adam Duritz said. I had this idea for a very simple 3 or 4 chord pattern that would go around over a hip-hop beat, and then all of a sudden exploding into a harmony of choruses. It just seemed like a really fun drum loopy thing to do. The band used a lot of tape loops on the song for the piano parts, but it doesn't sound that way. Dirt says that there are 8 different piano pieces layered together on the song, some that he played and others played by the keyboard player Charlie Gillerman. The video was shot in the living room of a house the band shared, with their real friends appearing in it. When Adam Duritz worked on the 2012 movie Freeloaders, he recreated the video for the final scene using the same house, but with the cast of the film. It was very interesting to close out, having the authenticity of using people you know in the real life to amplify what you mean and what you're saying as far as your means of the creative process in music. Very interesting. Alright, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. And on Friday's episode, I'm going to go in depth about the songs of Pete Seeger. Alright, take care.